I thought, well, that'd be something, wouldn't it? And I thought, well, some little Hitler youth will probably stick a dagger in me at midnight, or I better not. And anyway, if I don't get off soon, there'll be search parties looking for me, because I took off at this thing. The range of a meteor was only 45 minutes, and I'd been gone a couple of hours, so there'll be someone looking for me. But anyway, I flew back and had a hell of a fright landing, because they really did frighten me. I think there were some Americans around, because as I landed, I mean, I was in the Forester jeeps with the machine guns pointing at me and everything. And then they suddenly realised that we'd got roundels on and not black crosses, I think.
You had two engines and so did 262s, and the Yanks wouldn't know, would they?
Oh, they always shot at us. The Navy always shot at us.
Well, the war is over.
Yeah.
We better move on to motorsport.
And it was, probably a year or two after the war. I was in Charles Follett's office in London, and there was the Duke of Richmond, and somebody nudged me and said, look, there's Freddie. He's now the president of the Junior Car Club, and they're looking all over England for the equivalent of Silverstone to find an airfield to start motor racing. And I said, well, don't be bloody silly, he owns one. So they said, well, go and tell him. So I went and told him, and said, when are we going to have a sports car race around West Hamlet? And he said, why is that? And I said, well, we've been belting around it, and it seems rather good. And anyway, it went on for about 20 minutes. And he eventually said, well, I'll go into that, and when I get there, I'll have a drive around. But bless my soul, what will the neighbours say? And he's right, the neighbours have been saying it ever since. I mean, it's the present runners of Goodwood who are still in trouble with the noise and stuff from the neighbours. But anyway, many years later, I got a letter from the Duke after the circuit was closed, saying that that old circuit that you so smartly talked me into, he said, is still running and for testing, but it's no longer. And we were there, of course, for the original revival, and the whole thing is so well organised, it's scarcely true. I mean, it's like a play almost, and everyone plays the game. I mean, people do dress up in old clothes, and the policemen still turn away people who aren't properly dressed.
Well, you really started something. Now, 1948, there were many people here who were on the ground then. Admittedly, we were all children. And we went up to a place called Rob Roy, and we saw you arrive up there, I think it was 48, with a couple of cars, one with dual wheels on the back of it, and you put on quite a show. Can you tell us about the Alta? I know it was early, you bought a couple of Altas overseas and that you brought them out here. Remember those?
Well, the Alta was Jeffrey Taylor's bit of salesmanship, because I had bought the sports Alta to go in for hill climbs and things in England. And when I was coming back to Australia, I took it to the factory and said, will you go over this and make certain of thing? And he said, why are you taking this to Australia when I have Johnny Wakefield's old racing car, which I'll put a 2-litre engine in instead of 1.5. It'll be as quick as anything there is there, and it should be good. So he talked me into it, and of course it did nothing but go wrong. almost everything that could happen to a car happened. First, it had a lot to do with fixing it, but it now is in America worth a lot of money and going well.
Well, Graham and Betty Lowe are here tonight, I think. I saw Betty turn up, but I think Graham's over there, isn't he? There they are, look, they're over there. And he had the car and he sold it, and there it was. So it's being well looked after. But there was a time, you've got a media centre named after you over at Goodwood. You're now the father of Goodwood, but we've got Gazer's Gully at Rob Roy.
Yeah. Yeah, that was not funny. I was lucky to get away with bruises and things out of that because it flung me out quite a way.
Yeah. Now, the reason it flung you out or you lost it, was it because you were running short of shekels for back tyres or something?
I don't know what it was. We know the front axle broke, but we don't know whether. But it suddenly decided it wanted to turn right no matter what I did. And that was straight down the gully. And anyway, I mean, it did me a lot of good because driving it hard when it was quite difficult to keep it straight and things because it had a lot of power when it was going properly.
Who pulled the plug leads off? Because it was still upside down and the engine was still roaring and somebody pulled all the leads off. Was that you or somebody in the room?
It's probably someone in the room. I've heard so many people say I'm the one who pulled the plugs off. The plug leads off.
1949, you went back after reports of racing in Europe and you heard some stories about a young fellow called Sterling Moss, an HWM. You decided to go over and investigate. Can you tell us the story from then on?
Yeah, well, you see, I mean, I by then was married to Kate, Johnny Wakefield's widow, and when I'd been going around with her, well, we met all the drivers because he was British champion the year before the war and killed flying spit during the war. And they kept in touch with me when I came back to Australia. And mostly George Abacassis, I think, was saying, why the hell are you playing around out there when you can come here and have a go in Formula 2? He said, well, Formula 1's a bore. There's only half a dozen races, and but whereas Formula 2, you get a race every week. And the Alto engine we're using is doing very well with Sterling Moss driving. And why don't you do the same thing? And I'd ordered a new Alto to replace the 2-litre that I'd got here with a new chassis and a new engine. And I thought, well, the thing is that Jeffrey Taylor's already started working on that, but I can send him a cable saying leave the supercharger off. And obviously put the compressions up and things, and we'll have a go in Formula 2. And we did, and we had a whale of a time. I mean, you don't expect to win much when you've got 3 or 4 works teams against you, and all the Formula 1 drivers drove in Formula 2 as well.
Who were they? I mean, that time they were using Formula 2 as a bit of practice, weren't they?
Yeah, oh, they were. It wasn't practice. It was very serious stuff from the factories. In fact, at Monza, Ferrari would put in 4 factory Formula 2s, and there'd be 4 Maseratis and about 3 Gordinis and Maserati, and a whole lot of small teams like Cooper Bristols and Connaughts, and I mean there were a lot of cars that were really serious stuff.
And the big names, Fangio, Abacassis.
Well, Fangio, Farina, yeah. Ascari, Villarese, yeah. All raced in Formula 2.
And you were, and Tony Gaze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally I came 7th, and that was good.
Well, 7's a lucky number, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you went, I understand, your first real Grand Prix, and I'm reading from things I wrote a few years ago, and you corrected it, so it must be all right. You had your first real Grand Prix at Spa.
Yeah.
Okay, can you tell us about that? Because you hit something, I believe.
Oh yeah, everything went wrong in Spa, but it was very interesting because we were in the same garage as the Ferrari team, and in practice I wasn't going too badly at practice, and I shared the water pump, the rotor, and one thing we don't have to spare is the water pump. So we tried to get one from HWM. They wouldn't let us have one and everything else. So my mechanic, Frank Nadel, made one. He fabricated it overnight in the garage, cut it out of steel circle, welded the fins on, balanced it, fixed it. The Italian mechanics' eyes were popping out with it to see that the racing mechanic could fabricate a rotor for a water pump. And everything went together again and seemed to be okay. First lap in the race, I suddenly got blinded, and Geoffrey Taylor made everything himself, which was a nuisance because he never seemed to make any spares. And the water pump and the oil pump and the fuel pump were all made by him. And the fuel pump was made to pump water into a 2-litre supercharged engine with doing about 1.5 miles to the gallon. And so 90% of the fuel was being recirculated back into the tank with unblown engine and doing 10 miles to the gallon instead of 1.5. And it had stuck, and the pressure had gone off the gauge, so all the carburetors were flooding, and the methanol was coming all over me. And of course, luckily, in a way, it was methanol, because the engine could run on that rich mixture. If it had been petrol, it wouldn't have run at all. And I crept round, and he had to, because we hadn't got a spare fuel pump either, so he had to pull it apart and clear it. So by the time that was all done, I was out of the race really, but I ran on, and I was having quite a lot of fun. I passed quite a lot of people, and it was pouring with rain. And coming down the Master Straight, it was, I stick out of things like that a fair way, and my face was sticking out. And I suddenly was knocked out virtually, and a bird had hit me in the face. And I put my hand up, and there's this muck, and I thought, oh God, that's my eye. And of course, I'd got double vision, so it couldn't have been. So I then crept back and called it a day. And I couldn't get out of the car because I got double vision. A doctor came along and said, what's happened? I said, I had a bird hit me in the face at 140 miles an hour. And he said, okay, well, you know, have this and take that. And I was all right. And the ridiculous nonsense was that about a month later I was in England, and I had a first drive in an old Maserati, which has got a history for a mile-long seam, everybody's driven it. And I was leading this race at Snedden, and on the last lap, going down the straight, I could see this partridge flying across. I said, oh no. and it hit the aero screen and smashed it. And what it would have done to my face, I just hate to think. I mean, if it smashed the triplex glass, and Ken McAlpine, who was following me in his Connaught, and he said, it's the first time I've heard anyone throw bits of bird and bits of glass at me to try and stop me passing them.
You did a Felipe Massa 40 years earlier.
Anyway, I wouldn't have had a face, I mean, if it would break that. And I'm coming into the last hairpin, the thing went on 7 cylinders, and McAlpine beat me by a fifth of a second, which was a bit annoying after all that. But it's gone down in history anyway. But I often sort of think what it would have done to me. I mean, that screen, it's that thick glass.
Wouldn't have done in the old hunting days, sir, getting it with a Maserati rather than a 12-bore.
Yeah.
No,
Yes, I forgot the bit that all my friends, you know, the sort of Abacassis and Duncan Hamilton type friends, were all roaring with laughter and said, well, there it is, you've gone from a sparrow at Spa to a partridge. We reckon we'll bring 12 bores to Silverstone next week because it'll be a swan.
Well, you should have had a 12-bore at Reims a few months or weeks later when you couldn't get in. The coppers, somebody said, no, you hadn't entered. They had no knowledge of your entry.
No, that was the French Grand Prix.
Yeah, at Reims, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was officially, you know, you didn't enter things, you were invited. You had a great thing from the Automobile Club of the country offering you so much money. And we got to Reims, and they said, no, you're not, you're first reserve. And I said, but look, I'm staying in an expensive hotel with my wife, waiting for this race. I will need the starting money to pay the bills. What's the story? Oh, well, you know, we'll let you know tomorrow, So I eventually lost my temper because I was getting down to the point where I hadn't got enough money to pay the steamer to get me back to England because everything had to go by sea. So I loaded up and went. And I was almost on the boat and I thought, you clown. Because while I was at Spa, I got a letter from the leader of the resistance movement that saved me during the war. And they said that they were very sorry they couldn't get into the pits to pat me on the back at Spa. They would see me at Reims. And I reckon if I showed that to them, the thought of a whole lot of hairy resistance fighters turned up saying where's Gaze, he'd have quickly put me onto the entry feed. And I didn't think of it until it was too late.
Well, almost. Now, there's another interesting bit that we could talk about where you nearly wiped out a world champion, a Formula One champion.
Oh, well, that was, yeah. Well, that was trying to qualify for the Italian Grand Prix. And none of the HWMs were qualifying. I was the fastest. I was faster than the other drivers in HWM until the very last end. Then I just dropped back a bit, but it didn't matter. No HWMs qualified. And I was really desperate because it's a long way from England to Italy and I needed the starting money. And I had another go, and going around the curve of Grand Air, I saw Ascari coming up behind me, and I thought, right, now if I can keep it flat around the Lesmos, I can knock in behind him, get a toe down the back straight, and if I can manage to hang on to him at the south curve at the other end, I get a toe halfway down the main straight, I think. So I did try it, and completely lost it in the middle of the Lesmo. And he sort of went in the middle of me spinning, and he sort of went through looking rather peculiarly at me. So I thought, well, you're not supposed to hit the world champion. And so after the race, I went and apologised. And he listened to it. And he'd just come back from Indianapolis, and he'd learned a bit of English and had a bit of a talk. And he said, nothing. Slapped me on the back and said, now we go and have a cup of tea. So we went and had a cup of tea. And from then on, race meetings, whenever he met me, he took me for a cup of tea.
Now, in 1956, you had done some stirring around the world with Peter Whitehead, and you came out here with the Ferrari. Just let's have a quick story about the Ferrari and the HWM and the Grand Prix for Olympic Games and what happened to the Ferrari, because you didn't drive it here.
No. No, well, I sold it to Lex.
So Lex Davison drove the Ferrari, and that's the car. It happened to be, did it not, a very important car?
I mean, I got it from the factory. Lex got it from me. Several people got it out here, and it was virtually being cut up to be turned into something else when it was rescued by a bloke from England who took it back. And when last time I saw it closely, it was at Donington in the museum.
And it was.
And now it's the most valuable racing car in the world.
It was Ascari's car.
That was Ascari's car for he won 2 World Championships in it.
So it's incredible. Now let's talk about those people towards the end of the night, because I know we're all getting hungry, and so are you, but we can listen to you for hours. Let's think about some of the people with whom you drove. Do you have any memories, good or bad, of various people? Who sticks out in your mind as perhaps the best? Shouldn't ask you the worst, should I? But perhaps the best.
Well, the best driver? Well, I suppose Sterling. I mean, because he could win in anything. I mean, Fangio was brilliant.